Our topic is ego versus EQ, and so I'm going to kind of walk you through the principles of this concept and how it came about and some things that you can think about for yourself and or your organization as you look at how to bring more emotional intelligence in. I use the term EQ, but it's a nickname for EI, or emotional intelligence, and it actually started out being called EQ, or emotional quotient, back in the 80s when this concept was first identified, and so it sort of stuck. But today it's really more than a quotient. It really is a form of intelligence and has become a legitimate behavioral science. So I'll tell you a little bit more about it and kind of how I came to this topic. But for those of you that have seen me speak at a live event, I'm going to run through some content that may be familiar, but I also have a few new things. And then, of course, the best part is we have time at the end for questions, as Angela said, which we don't always get when we're in a live venue and it's very busy. So feel free to jump in with your questions as we go through here, and I'll make sure we get them answered one way or another. So emotional intelligence, I think people have been hearing about it and talking about it, and really what I've spent my career and our team has done is really tried to bring practical applications of this concept into companies, whether that's hiring people with emotional intelligence, developing emotional intelligence in the existing workforce, and most importantly, sort of demonstrating emotional intelligence at the highest levels of the company. And you may have had the same experience I have, which is really when it comes down to success or failure, so often it isn't what somebody knows. It isn't their IQ that often determines how well they're going to do. It really comes down to how well they share that knowledge and how well they communicate with others and manage themselves. That determines it. And I think we rely very heavily on technical skills or knowledge, and it can really end up hurting us. And so I've really focused on EQ in this book for leaders, because I think it's really important that we recognize the role that we have, and as we climb in our careers, and those of you that are currently at the highest levels of your organization, understand that you at some point have to be a generalist. You can no longer be the subject matter expert anymore. It's not practical, it's not reasonable. You have people to do those things. And so we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and being more of a generalist than a specialist. And so one of the ways to do that, of course, is by leveraging emotional intelligence. So the way that this is defined is there are three main components. It is, one, your ability to recognize yourself, high self-recognition, knowing your strengths, but also knowing your weaknesses, knowing your personality type, knowing your moods, what drives you, all those good things. So high self-recognition. Two, your ability to read people and situations accurately. So it's being able to kind of situational awareness, plugging into what's happening in the room and a lot of the nonverbal body language that happens, and or how are people reacting to you based on what you're saying or doing. Can you read the audience in real time? And then lastly, it's your ability to respond appropriately. So choosing responses that are appropriate for that situation or person you're interacting with. Some people have more of a kind of one-size-fits-all approach to this, and so they approach a client the same way they approach a coworker, the same way they approach their boss, and they kind of have this, you know, this is who I am approach. And we know that that's lower adaptability interpersonally and less EQ on the whole. So it's recognize, read, and respond. So if you think about it, that's the competency. In order for me to have that competency, I need to have a skill set that allows me to do that. So there are several skills. I'm going to cover just a couple of them for time today, but if you're interested, there are actually assessments available that you can test for emotional intelligence. And one version we use has 15 skills included in the measurement, and another one has 12. So there's many skills, but I'm going to cover just a few of the big ones today. The first one, of course, is self-awareness. So this is the first R in the definition. Knowing yourself, both emotional self-awareness and social self-awareness. So emotional self-awareness is really that piece around your moods, what motivates you, what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and being able to communicate that feeling to others. It's also social self-awareness. How connected are you to the perception other people have of you? Are those two things aligned? Another skill that's vitally important is self-control. So this is your ability to not say or do inappropriate things, even when you really, really, really want to. And I think it's tempting to think, oh, well, the more self-control, the better, because obviously low self-control looks like anger, it looks like emotional outbursts, it might be impulsiveness. All of those things are connected to low self-control. But even sometimes too much self-control can get you into trouble. If you're too reserved, if you don't speak up enough, those can be just as damaging as losing control or losing your composure. Adaptability is another vital skill, especially I think today and for all employees at all levels. This is your ability to be flexible and open to change. This is being able to stay productive even through times of ambiguity. This is ease of learning something new. Vital, as you can guess, because our jobs today are requiring employees to do a lot more than they used to with an individual role, and things are changing in the workplace, and we need employees who can pick up new skills, who can try different things and aren't resistant. And optimism, which is a sort of a belief system that the future will be better than the past. Optimists sort of see each problem as an individual occurrence, and so they can kind of isolate certain things and still maintain a positive attitude. Pessimists often feel that each problem is a grand plan against them, and we see kind of a victimness that comes with pessimism. So vital, as you can guess, because it spreads, it's contagious. So we need employees with good positive attitudes that help bring everyone else up instead of bringing everybody down. So these are a few of the core skills that are required. But why do you think EQ is so important? And this has been around, like I said, for years now, and organizations have been trying to implement this concept. I think sometimes it comes across as a little bit academic, but we see some real need out there that EQ can fill. One is failure rate. So according to HBR, 2 in 5 Fortune 500 CEOs tend to fail in the first 18 months on the job. It tends to be a pretty high turnover position. As you can guess, there's a lot going on for a publicly traded CEO, and the failure rate is pretty high. So in small business, you're not isolated either. 2/3, according to the Small Business Administration, 2/3 of small businesses fail in the first 10 years. Not good. And then ultimately, 100% of CEOs, when surveyed, said they would love to get an executive coach, but 2/3 don't get one. So, and I understand this completely, because really to do coaching well, it requires a real strong willingness to take a good hard look at ourselves, and that's not always easy, and it requires some humility, and that's not very common. And so I was trying to kind of figure out what happens. Like, I studied EQ, like I said, for 15, 20 years now. I'm certified in several of the tools. I know how important it is, and yet I still see a lot of challenges with individuals being able to use EQ, and particularly at the top. And I saw one study that said that the group of employees in most organizations with the highest EQ are the middle managers. So it doesn't matter like categorically whether that's middle managers in sales, IT, operations. Middle managers in general have the highest EQ. Guess who has the lowest? The CEO, the C-suite, the C-level employee tends to have the lowest EQ. And I was so perplexed by that. I was trying to understand what happens, because if you have it as a middle manager, where does it go? And at the top is when you almost need it most. So as I was starting to go through my own work, and there's been a lot of documented studies that show the tangible benefits of this concept. So one study is higher earnings. Employees with higher EQ actually earn more money a year, a lot more money, $29,000 more a year on average. And then there's a great article called What Makes a Leader, and Dan Goleman went out and studied a variety of organizations, and what he said is when he went in, he took a look at 188 executive leaders, and then took a look at employees at all levels inside those organizations and gave them technical skills assessments, IQ tests, and emotional intelligence assessments. And this is what he said. When he compared the ratio of those three things, the EQ proved to be twice as important as IQ and technical skills for jobs at all levels. And so what I've really seen is employees that embrace the competency of EQ, it becomes a differentiator for them. It is a difference maker. And the higher up you go, the more and more that shows up. And part of the reason, I think, is because as you start to grow in your career, things level out among you and your peers. You know, you have maybe the same level of education. You've had the same number of years of experience in the industry. You've managed people roughly around the same amount of time. Now the only difference between me and one of my peers is how well I connect, I motivate, and I engage my employees. And in order to have an emotionally engaged employee, I have to be an emotionally engaging leader. So I actually see EQ as the fastest path to higher employee engagement, which is something we are all after. So I was asked to come in and work with a manager one time, and I went in to meet with him, and I said to him, can you tell me, if I were to meet with your staff, how you think they would describe your management style to me? Like, what would they say about your management? And he said, oh, you know, Jen, I'm a direct, you know, I'm a driver. I've taken those personality tests, and I'm just one of those high Ds. And that means I kind of just say what's on my mind. And I really don't feel that I have to sugarcoat things all the time, because in the end, you know, we're at work, and I'm not here to make friends. I have a lot of friends outside of work. I don't need more friends at work. So I tell people, if I upset you or offend you, don't take it personally, because I don't ever mean it that way. It's just business. And I thought, okay, well, I guess if I look at his EQ skill set, we have to give him some credit for some self-awareness, because clearly he's heard that this is how he is, and he's owning it, which I like. But what I really felt was his message was, look, this is me. This is how I'm comfortable. It's on you to adjust. And that, to me, became the driving theme about what gets in our way when it comes to EQ. It is not enough to just know yourself. You also, almost more importantly, have to be able to read that audience and know who you're communicating with, and take responsibility for the adapting on your side instead of their side. And here's the rub of it for leaders. Your employees are working very hard to keep you comfortable, to say, no problem, you're direct, I got it, I won't take it personally. That's part of their job. That's part of the dynamic between leader and follower. And so you have to be really aware that people are going to be pushing really hard to keep you comfortable. So that's really where this whole concept of ego comes in. Not just ego that you're arrogant. You know, I have a lot of people, managers tell me, I'm not arrogant. I don't think I'm better than anybody else I work with. And so in the context of this, I don't necessarily see it that way. In fact, in the US, there is a bit of a bias toward ego. You know, I think we like ego in the US. I have two words for you on this. Donald Trump. I mean, we like that though. I think in the US we feel like ego is moxie, it's power, it's confidence. Ego is what gets you out of bed every day sometimes. It's what helps you get over a setback. So it's not that I'm saying ego is bad, because I think some ego is good. But it's when ego starts to take over that we have to really be careful. And this is why I called it verses, because they really are in a lot of ways mutually exclusive. When I'm operating from a place that's good for me, that's better for me than you, I'm doing that at your expense. When I operate from a place of EQ, so let's look at this manager. Yes, he has self-awareness. He knows he's a high D or a direct, okay? I honestly don't think he can change that about himself permanently. That's part of who he is. But with some EQ, he understands, okay, I would love to just say what I'm thinking right now, but he's reading his audience, and he knows who on his team is like that, who's the same way and is comfortable hearing it pretty directly, and who on his team is not. And then he responds uniquely based on how he's reading that person. That's how you take that high D and layer on some EQ. So now I want to kind of hear from you. I'm going to give you our first poll question. Angela, I will have you help me with this. So here's your question. Have you ever worked with somebody who, in spite of having very, very solid business skills and maybe strong intellect, is not only a challenge to work with, but is also their own worst enemy? And this is a very simple yes or no.
Okay, everyone, if you could go ahead and cast your votes, we'll take just a few seconds. I was feeling some Tom Jones today, Jen. I wanted to get some
Some music.
You.
I like it. We need a little poll music.
Exactly, poll music. I know.
I like it.
All right, we'll just give a few more seconds. Looks like everybody, well, I won't give away the results yet, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. I will share the results with all of you and let Jen know, because she cannot see them. 100% said yes, they have worked with someone.
I don't think we've had that happen. 100%.
No, I don't think we have either.
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. Okay. So first of all, my condolences. But I think you get what I'm saying then. This is not about knowledge. This is, I don't know if you guys watch the show. It's one of my favorites, called The Big Bang Theory. And I always think of those guys because they're so smart. It's a group of scientists, basically, that work at Caltech. But their IQ is like off the chart, and their social skill and EQ is very low. And it's, of course, hilarious because I see shades of people I know in real life in those characters. And you've all been there. So I think it's really important that we keep a healthy balance here of those business skills, which are important, like EQ, but in check with ego. So let's take a look at what triggers ego. One is a type A personality, and I will admit myself, I am a type A. So type A is often described by others on the nice side as focused, goal-oriented, ambitious, motivated, but there's also a dark side to the type A, and I also portray all of these, which is driven to the point of almost blind ambition, checklist addicted, check, 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 and all the things we do that meets our needs and agenda that gets in the way of everybody else. And I was working with a gal one time, and she's probably what I would call a triple A personality. I mean, she kind of put me to shame even. And she was in a role that required her to be very diligent. It was a big project management role. And she was the type who, on the weekends, she was on email. Sunday night, she's sending out all her to-do lists of email stuff. On vacation, she would always check in and see what was going on, either by phone or email. And so she never took a break. And she ended up in coaching, and she was a great example of somebody who was overusing her strengths. And when I met with her team to get some feedback for her, they said, and even her colleagues and coworkers said, she's one of the best. Like, we love how diligent she is and how well she gets things done. But naturally, because she never takes a break, she's going to burn out. And we're worried about her doing that. So we really, really hope that you can encourage her to take some real time off. Like, don't do email on the weekend, and don't email, take a vacation completely free. And they said, you know, we think it'll be good for her, but also we need the break. So I think type A's, we wear people out. We wear them down. And so that can start to look like it's all about me and my agenda and what I want to accomplish at everyone else's expense. Stress is another big one. I think anytime we're stressed out, bad behavior just shows up. And so, again, when we're stressed, we tend to lean into our strengths and push them too far that they start to become a weakness on us. We also see ego triggered by that person who is very concerned about their external image. And so that plays out into somebody who wants to review things, who wants to make sure everything looks exactly the way they want it, can't look bad to anybody, shows no vulnerability of any kind. And so we have these 8 ego traps. These are the things that happen to leaders. And I will say I use the term traps for a reason. I do think that there's a little bit of a setup that happens. And some of it, like I said, is because our employees set us up for this, our organizations set us up for this, and it's human nature. So I'm just going to very quickly run through these 8 ego traps with you so you understand what they look like and how to start considering ways to prevent them. But I think ultimately one thing that comes up a lot is we have so much out of our control every day. And I think this is some of why companies fail and leaders fail, is there is a lot out of our control. You know, we can't control the economy, and we can't control our competitors, and we can't control sometimes our supply chain. Things happen in business. So with so much out of our control, doesn't it make sense to focus on the probably one thing that is completely in your control, which is your own behavior? And that's the thing that I think most leaders overlook. They overlook the power of their own control over themselves. And so hopefully avoid a lot of these traps from happening, even though you may have headwinds working against you. So ego trap 1 is ignoring feedback you don't like. And it could be either ignoring it or just not getting it at all. And not getting feedback is a very common challenge for leaders, especially senior leaders. And this is as old as the emperor wearing no clothes. Like, nobody wants to give the boss bad news. Nobody wants to say, hey, you really screwed up in that meeting, or you really made somebody feel inferior the way you said that. We might get feedback on our business decisions, on a strategic move. We don't often get a lot of good feedback on our interpersonal behaviors. And I know it's easy to think, oh, you know, bask in the feedback. Because I had one client, I was working with a president of a large company, and he said, if I just looked at the ratio of positive to negative feedback I get from people on a day-to-day basis, I would think I was a rock star. Because he's like, I get a mountain of positive and just like a few little tiny kernels of negative. And he said, I really can't just listen to my own press, though. I have to understand that the ratio doesn't matter. It's the kind of feedback I'm getting or not getting I have to pay attention to. So there's three reasons why people don't give you feedback. One is just fear, just the general concern for either retaliation or thinking, you thinking that they're not a good team player, they're not supporting you, something along those lines. Two, they don't give you feedback because you don't take it well, and you make it so painful for them. You get either so defensive or challenging or want to know so much detail that to them it's just not worth it to go through it with you. And here's the third one, and I kind of feel like almost the most deadly, is they give you feedback, but they never see you do anything with it. And you might take that feedback graciously. We were working with a leader one time, Steve, on our team, and he did some feedback again from her peer group, and they said, "Oh, she's a terrible listener. She's horrible. She never listens to us." And when he met with her, he found her actually to be a very good listener. She didn't interrupt. She didn't talk over. She thoughtfully listened to everything she took. But what he realized was she was listening, but she wasn't doing anything with the feedback. And so to them, that meant she wasn't listening. And so that's the other thing that can happen is people give up on you because they feel like, I've told you this before, quit asking me for more. I've already given it to you and you're not doing anything with it. So this is one really vital piece, and I encourage organizations to be doing formal feedback like 360 feedback, which is multi-rater feedback, because that's a great way to get some anonymous feedback. And the other tool that we use quite often, we call source interview feedback, and that is where we actually call out to the strategic or stakeholder group around the person and customize the questions and get data for the person in a summarized format. So it's not a literal format like a 360 online would be. But anyway, you can get the feedback. That's going to be really vital to your foundation. Okay, ego trap 2 is believing your technical skills trump your leadership skills. And when I say technical skills, I don't mean, you know, computer skills. I mean any type of technical skill. So this is a very common trap seen with engineers, lawyers, certainly IT professionals, doctors, anyone who's very high in technical expertise in whatever field they're in. And they rely very heavily on this. And again, it's a trap, I think, because we set people up for this from the standpoint we promote people on expertise oftentimes. It's, you know, we don't look around and go, oh, who's the most mediocre salesperson but seems to have some leadership potential? Let's promote them. We go to the top salesperson and we go, hey, would you like to be sales manager? And we do it for all roles. And so people think, oh, well, that's why I got promoted, so that's what I will do more of. But you all know that skill to be a great salesperson doesn't necessarily translate over to being a great leader. And so it's really important that we weigh those things heavily when we're looking for people to promote, when we're looking for role change, is how can we flip that over? And again, like I said before, as you grow in your career, those technical skills are going to become less and less and less important. So developing leadership skills in yourself and others is one of your best ways to ensure a promotion. Okay, so we have our next poll question here. This one ties to the technical expertise. Any idea what the predictive success correlation is between high IQ and high job performance? Meaning the smarter, the Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory, like that high IQ correlated directly to high job performance.
Okay, everyone, sorry about that little pause.
Sorry,
There's so many
people, a little cue.
attendance that I couldn't find my own name in the attendee list to unmute myself. All right, so let's get back to our voting, and it looks like
we're being a little sorry, guys. We're can you tell we're live today?
How near you? All right. So 4 seconds, everyone. Looks like just about everybody's got their answers in. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. share results. And here you go, Jen. We have 18% said A, 18% said B, 18% said C,
Wow.
and 47% said D.
D. Okay. Well, great. So this data comes from Gartner Group, and they do studies on IQ and job performance quite often. And actually, the third, 18% of you that answered B, 5% got it right. It's a very small number, surprisingly low. Most people answered, like many of you, D, that it's about 25% of the time somebody who's really, really smart will also be good at their job. But it is crazy how low this correlation is. Now, I will say high IQ is a very good predictive correlation with academic success, but we're seeing it less and less in business and in jobs today. And I'm sure you can understand, like, we've gotten to the point we don't have people who are sitting in a cubicle on a computer, not interacting with others, just solving problems all day. Everything today requires some form of collaboration and coordination and sharing that knowledge with others. So we do know at the highest levels of IQ, there's actually an inverse correlation with EQ, not probably surprising, where social skills and other skills get underdeveloped, and IQ gets overdeveloped, and we can't just rely on that, of course. And you know, the bottom line is you only need an average IQ to learn EQ, and IQ ends up being set once you're in your late teens. That's it. Your IQ does not increase as you age, but luckily EQ does. And since it's a much better predictor of success, in fact, one study is 90% of successful work is high EQ. Okay, so trap 3, surrounding yourself with more of you. Who doesn't want that, right? So this is not an uncommon thing either to see, because a lot of times what happens is we gravitate to people who we're similar to, or we have common experiences with, or you know, we went to the same school, or we went to school in the same area, or we have kids the same age, or whatever it is. And pretty soon it's easy to get a team of people around you that start to really look and act the same. And so I'm not just talking about you know, physical characteristics of diversity, but I'm also talking about, do you have diversity of age groups? Do you have diversity of education experience? Meaning, do you not only have maybe Ivy Leaguers, but you also have some state college kids from the West? You know, how diverse is your educational experience as a team? Communication style differences, personality type differences. And here's one of the things that happen, I think, is we end up with a lot of hiring bias. And again, well-intentioned, a lot of organizations are trying to hire now for what they call fit, right? So I want to know, does this person fit in my organization? Would they fit in with the group I have right now? Not just what their experience is on the resume, but really how would they fit in personality-wise? Well, guess what? It's easy to then see, you can start to line up a bunch of people the same. If you have an organization that's heavily introverted, you have an extrovert show up for an interview and they're all, hi, how are you? And everyone's like, oh my gosh, they're never going to make it here. We're going to have to kill them. So we eliminate them in the hiring process. So beware. Take a good hard look at your hiring practices. Find out if you've got multiple people doing interviews of different, again, if they're diverse, then you won't have that temptation to click with certain people just like you. And actively work to recruit differences at the same time. And then even for yourself, you know, ask yourself, who do you have lunch with every day? Or who's that group that you tend to hang out with a lot at work? Can you add some more diversity to that? Naturally, the more we think alike, the less people we will have to challenge us, question us, or give us feedback that we might really need when we're going off track. Okay, ego trap 4. So this is the classic kind of micromanager, having a hard time delegating, doesn't want to let people complete tasks without some final review. Sometimes this happens with somebody who was in the job and got promoted along the way, but still really loves that job and maybe misses the work and wants to do more of it. Or a boss a small company, let's say, where they had to do everything and slowly the company has grown and now people have been hired to do the things they used to do and they're not letting go of it. And then you just have the classical, kind of control freak out there. So I know ego would say, I'm just helping out the team by jumping in on this. But EQ would ask you, what are you doing to prepare your team to work independently? And one of the kind of classic examples of this ego trap is how long the line is out your office door when you come back from vacation, because that will indicate to you how many things you have to be reviewing, approving, etc. You also have to ask yourself how many direct reports you have. If you've got more than about 8 or 10, then you may have also fallen into this trap. So this, of course, the way out of this is really strong delegation, understanding that it may never feel comfortable to trust and let go, but you have to do it anyway. Okay, ego trap 5 is being blind to your downstream impact. And this happens in a couple of different ways. One common way is level jumping. And level jumping is where the boss or the manager goes to an individual in the organization that maybe doesn't even work for them, but they have a relationship with or used to work for them, and they say, hey, could you just do this one little favor for me? I know it's really not your job anymore, but I really, really like the way you do those reports. And so they end up kind of cutting across reporting lines, and they delegate tasks that they really shouldn't be delegating, and then the manager in the middle doesn't even know what's going on. So that's one way that this shows up. Another way is sort of rapid change with little explanation. So it's that manager who doesn't have the patience to see a strategy play through. They don't like the results they're getting in the first few weeks, and they go, okay, forget that idea, let's do something else. A lot of managers or employees dread the day the Harvard Business Review comes out, or when their boss goes to a conference, because they always come back with all these great ideas. I had one client who his wife worked for a small business, and the owner of the business had gone to a conference, and he came back and he said, I just went to this conference and everybody's talking about going green and going paperless. I think it is so cool. It's such a great idea. Let's do it starting tomorrow. And of course, she was like, you've got to be kidding me. So it's often that they want to implement some dramatic new change, but they don't really consider the consequences of what that's going to do to the downstream. So this one is vitally important that, you may have a great idea, but bring it to the team, ask them about timing of it, consider what the impact's going to be all the way down the line. It may not be quite as easy for them to implement at their level as it would be for you at your level. So this is tied to that kind of impulsiveness that can happen to leaders. And based on that, I found a really interesting stat that I put in the book, and I'm going to ask it as a poll question. So are you ready, Ange? Here we go. Do business owners have a higher rate, do you think, of diagnosed ADHD? Diagnosed. And we're going.
I'm watching the ticker go up. This is a fast one.
I like it.
Thinking, yes or no. All right. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm closing the polls. Wow, this is a shocking result. I don't think we've ever had a result this close. 58% said yes, and 42% said no.
Wow, I think you're right. We're normally a little bit more biased. Okay, well, almost half and half, I guess. The 58% have it. The answer is yes. Now, to the 42% of you, a lot of people will say, he's not been diagnosed, but he definitely has it. So you may have run into that too, or she definitely has it, even though I know she hasn't been diagnosed. This is so common. It is so common, in fact, that if somebody has been diagnosed with ADHD, which I call E-ADHD, executive ADHD, they are 300% more likely to start their own business. So if you work for a small business owner, there's a very good chance this is something you're living with. And if you are a small business owner, try and keep in mind that there could be some longer term consequences to being too impulsive. There's some great upside to it. I'll definitely say that, but just watch the downside there. Okay, so trap 6 is underestimating how much you're being watched. And one of the poll questions we ask on our webinar on this particular topic is, how often do you notice when your boss leaves and arrives at work? And the numbers end up almost always around 80% of the time. People notice when you leave and arrive at work if you're the boss. And I even was working with one gal who was a senior vice president who reported to a CFO, and she told me, well, I would really rather not leave until at least 5 o'clock because that's when I know she leaves. And I was thinking to myself, you're a senior vice president and you're still worrying about this. So I think it's really important that, and the CFO would say all day long, don't go by my hours. You know, I know people work all the time. I don't expect you to be here all the same hours I'm here, but they can say it and people will still not do it. So I was working with another organization. It was a healthcare company, and they had multiple locations. And one of the branches that was close to the corporate office was being used to film the CEO in a kind of media piece. So they were doing a news story about this CEO and the company and all that. And so they took him out to the local community that they owned so they could kind of get him like in action, in the field kind of thing. So he went out there and spent the day filming with everybody. And after they left, I talked to one of the employees there and I said, how did it go, you know, with the CEO being in? And she said, oh, it was great. It wasn't too disruptive to operations. And the only thing that, you know, was a little bit disappointing was when he was done, he just basically packed up with the crew and they left. And I said, oh, well, I'm sure he had another meeting to go to or some other event, which most CEOs do. And she said, yeah, I'm sure he did. The only thing is our community won Community of the Year last year. And so we were kind of hoping he might stay and chat with our caregivers and some of our employees and kind of talk to them a little bit about, you know, what we're doing and congratulate them and all that. But it's okay. I know he's really, really busy. And I thought, oh, you know, I know that CEO, and I would never say he's arrogant or thinks he's too good to sit and talk with frontline employees. But I think he just completely missed the fact that while he was there, they were watching every move he made. And when he didn't stop and spend time with them, they felt completely invisible to him. And it's just a huge missed opportunity. No one expects you, if you're from the corporate office or you're an executive, they don't expect you to drop everything and hang out with them. I know that. But imagine the power when you do. Imagine the influence you have when you do that kind of thing. So it's just really important that you don't have your own special rules that no one else has, because they'll see it for sure. Now, trap 7 is losing touch with the frontline experience. And this is more common, as you can probably guess, in a very large organization or multinational organization. But it's also what happens to executives as they start to grow and get more successful in their own careers. According to the Economic Policy Institute in 2001, so this is actually probably even higher now, but in 2011, I should say, 2011, CEOs made 231 times more money as the average employee. CEOs made 231 times more than the average employee, not the lowest, the average. So we see already a huge difference in experience and lifestyle from the top to the bottom. But one particular story that I love to tell about this is a property management company who had been having a tough year. Normally they did annual bonuses during the holiday season in December at the end of the year. And this one year, it was a really tough year, and they had told everybody that bonuses were probably not going to happen, or they would be very low if they did. And so as the year went on, of course, everybody was disappointed and worked hard, and it got to be the fall, and one of the managers went to the vice president of human resources and said, hey, my team is asking, the holidays are around the corner. How is it looking with the bonuses? Do you think that we might get some this year, or where, kind of where are we at? And the vice president of human resources said, oh, I am so sick of everybody asking me about the bonuses, okay? Do they think I'm not looking forward to getting a bonus this year, that I'm not anxiously waiting to see if we get one? I have a brand new BMW sitting on the lot that I can't go get until I get my bonus. And this manager was just like, are you kidding me right now? I have people who are maybe not going to get a Christmas tree this year if they don't get a bonus, and you're worrying about your new BMW. I mean, and she was saying it really earnestly. Again, it wasn't ego saying it. She wasn't bragging. She was trying to kind of be like, I'm with you. I'm feeling the same pain you are, that we don't know what's happening. And it was her attempt to use empathy, but in a completely clueless way. No EQ at all. So if you have employees working out in your organization in different locations, work really hard to get out there. And of course, the ultimate is you work alongside them, like the show Undercover Boss, which I also enjoy. And so they actually go out in disguise to their own companies and do the work of their frontline employees. And lots of successful organizations employ that as a standard practice. People like Disney and Nordstrom and Zappos routinely have people at the top working with the frontline. Okay, so Ego Trap 8 is really a matter of I've worked really hard, I've employed a lot of emotional intelligence, I've avoided these ego traps, and then when I have a bad day, to heck with it, it's all about me. So it is using some of these skills and then reverting back when things get stressful or you get fatigued or you don't have anybody holding you accountable to the new behaviors. So that's why coaching is such a successful tool to permanently increase emotional intelligence over time, because there's a whole accountability piece built in, as you can guess. So anyway, you can have accountability partners assigned. You can find your own accountability partner and give people permission to kind of call you when they see you resorting back or reverting back to bad behavior. Those things can really help you lock down. We know that people can permanently change. It just doesn't happen overnight. And so you need to have a very consistent, practiced approach to increasing your self-awareness, self-control, and empathy, the 3 R's. So the more you do that, the better. So basically, we talked about recognize and the importance of your emotions, moods, and social self-awareness. So that's all self-awareness. Reading others, which is empathy, and responding with good judgment and consideration for the people in the situation you're in, which is using that self-control. So that's how you use the 3 R's to avoid the ego traps. I am ready to take some questions.
Okay, I'm here. We have one question already, Jen.
Great.
I know we normally skip on to, but if everybody wants to just hang out after we get the question, so make sure you get your emails. But here's the question: why do execs lose EQ if presumably they had it as middle managers?
Yes, that was my same question. I couldn't figure out what was going on. And here's what happened. So in order for me to read and respond and use that EQ I have to have good feedback. I have to know that what I'm doing is wrong, and I need to adapt it or change it. And so that's what happens and that's why ego trap 1 is not getting feedback. That's what trips us up. We get a false reading a false positive in a lot of cases the higher up you go. So I'm told, oh, you handled that meeting great, when in reality I didn't at all. So I don't think, oh, I've got to change. I guess I handled it great. And so that's how I lose my ability to use the EQ I have. And that's by having a good, solid feedback mechanism in place all the time. You can't just take a 360 once and go, okay, I know. You know, it's something that's a constantly moving target. And every time, you know, we recommend every 2 to 3 years you retake a 360 so you can stay grounded. Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it. Great to have you today.